Hearts as open as our doorways, make us worthy, God in heaven, of this goodly land of thine. Alabama.
New times have come to Manderlay. Slavery was abolished 70 years ago. If you won't obey that law of your own accord, we will compel you to do so.
It's a local matter. It's not for us to poke our noses in.
We whites have committed an irreparable crime against an entire people.
I feel we ain't ready for a completely new way of life.
There's nothing to be afraid of. This time I have the power to act. We intend to stay here, and we shall have to see about ripening you, and quickly. Although our ideals differ, Manderlay is a moral obligation.
I am fooled. You're not interested in us, not as human beings.
What you did was all very noble, my girl, but you've just made everything far worse.
With all your idealism, we must have seemed a mite bit ungrateful.
Give him hell from me, Jim.
But I ain't Jim.
They're both colored and they both got curly hair.
You can stop being proud and silent.
If I were you, I would leave now before things get too nasty.
I thought we were the ones who made the decisions. The no mercy ought to be shown to her.
It must not be an act of vengeance. What happened?
If you want a clear answer, you're going to ask somebody else.
You make me sick.
We color folks can be awfully hard to kill if we want it that way. Come on. How dumb do you really think we are?
That's democracy.
Hello, welcome to Movie Umpers. My name is Bob Sham.
My name is Angela.
We're nearing the end of the year, nearing the end of our overarching year's theme, in which we discuss the movies of Lars von Trier, the dreary year of Lars von Trier. We added to this year to just make this year suck more, having to sit through these bleak, cynical movies. Not saying they're all bad.
No, some of them are really great.
But some of them it's just like, all right, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, guy. I don't think this is too bad. But
Come on, dude.
This is a little bit closer to, come on, guy. Come on, man. Yeah, we're talking about Lars von Trier and the second film in his America, the Land of Opportunity trilogy. He has not made the third one yet. Maybe he will. Hopefully he will if he wants to. It's called Washington, so each has a town name going on. And I think at the end of the movie, we see the character seem to make her way there. But it's a bit of, I forget what they call this, but when the casting where it's like different people as you keep going.
Usually it's like an anthology because some of the characters from one movie will play different characters in the next one.
Yeah, something like that. Instead of Nicole Kidman, we got
Bryce Dallas Howard.
Bryce Dallas Howard, and replacing James Caan as her gangster father is Willem Dafoe.
Another Willem Dafoe.
We've got a lot of him. We got a lot of no Stellan Skarsgård in this movie, which is surprising.
But we did see a dick.
But yeah, but we do have other people from the last movie show up playing different characters, including Lauren Bacall, who owns slaves. How do we find that out?
As soon as the car pulls up with Grace and her daddy, there's a woman screaming, running towards the car saying, help him, they're gonna beat him. And she runs and realizes that these guys are about to whip this man for having stolen something.
What are you talking about? Who? Who are they gonna whip?
Timothy.
Why?
That's how they do us slaves.
Slaves?
Yes, ma'am. Surely you heard of slaves.
And this is a little place called Manderlay, where this movie is supposed to take place 60 years after slavery ends. So this is like in the 30s or something like that. 60, 70 years. Just like in the last movie, there is a minimal set. It pulls back. And it's only interesting when we get to a proper town structure again.
Yeah.
I was kind of wondering here, was it always Lars's intent to make multiple movies like this? I mean, I wouldn't put it past him if that was true, because I really admired the idea in Dogville.
I did too.
And then when I realized, we're going back into that, it made me question it, especially at first because they're on the exterior of this town, so everything just looks dark and pillory. Like, it doesn't look interesting at all.
No.
Until, like I said, we actually get into Manderlay. But it seems like we're still miming opening doors and shutting them. But in Dogville, there were things where we could see through the walls when secrets and bad things were occurring. It doesn't seem like that particular notion is played up specifically as much in Manderlay. It seems like Lars is trying to like just get through trying to say a greater concept around slavery, and which was kind of the revelation in the last movie. And this one is absolutely Bryce Dallas Howard playing Grace, and we know she knows what it's like to be enslaved. But she comes to this place. She basically takes over Manderlay after Lauren Bacall's character dies.
There's a book under my mattress. I should like you to retrieve it and burn it for me.
She realizes in that moment that this is the history of what this woman has done here with these people, and she's like, no, it needs to stay because it's documenting what you did. But she doesn't read it at first. She would not say that she takes over. She would say that she tries to empower these people. But she does become someone who is giving lectures, trying to teach them things, trying to intervene where she sees fit to say, hey, don't you think you should be maybe thinking about this now?
We're talking about the film Manderlay from 2005 by Lars von Trier, written by him, starring Bryce Dallas Howard, Danny Glover, Willem Dafoe, Isaac de Bankolé, Lauren Bacall. He plays Thomas, or Timothy. Narrated by John Hurt. Again, this was quite a script. If you want to hear John Hurt say the N-word like 50 times, you got to check this movie out. And I forgot to put the cinematographer up there. Oh, sorry. I just forgot. Anthony Dodd Mantle.
This movie visually was definitely not as impressive as the first one. In the first one, it felt so specific and intentional and necessary even to the way the story was told. This one felt like an afterthought of, I need to do it like I did the one before.
It's more like, it just felt more like for continuity's sake as opposed to utilizing the notion as it was used originally in Dogville, which we thought was very good.
Amazing, yeah.
And we'd never seen anything like that. And seeing it again, it was just like, all right.
It was a bit of a letdown.
Maybe. I kind of wanted something completely different in some way.
Yes, I did too. And the beginning of it did start out looking a little different because in Dogville, it was a drawn out street on like what seemed like a chalkboard or something. And then you went down into the place. This one, it was a map. And so automatically I was like, maybe they're going to do something a little bit different. But then when they came down from the map and it was just this dark blackness. That's the other thing about the other. You could tell where the world ended, kind of.
Yeah.
Because the walls would change colors and things. And I just didn't get that sense in this one. I felt like I never knew where things were in conjunction to other things except maybe the meeting hall and the little old lady's house.
They did such a good job having the environment mean something so specific last time in that minimal way. And it just felt a little more half-hearted this time.
The only time it played a very big part that was meaningful was in the story of the little girl who dies.
Yeah. This is also the movie where John C. Reilly was in it and left because they had slaughtered a donkey. Apparently it was filmed, but Lars opted not to put it in. And I don't know how much they had to reshoot or who John C. Reilly played.
Or when or why they...
Yeah. So
they do talk about the donkey meat. They do say that they slaughtered the donkey.
To feed a sick child there.
Yeah.
And so we see a donkey, but we don't see any slaughtering. But apparently a donkey was slaughtered. And while that does happen, and people will eat it, it was, John C. Reilly was just like, nah. And it seems kind of pointless to do it. So I don't know what to think. Like, is it worse that he did it and then just didn't show it? Or... it would have been hard to sit through, but if he'd showed it, it seemed like it would have at least meant slightly more.
Yes, because now what he did...
not that I want to see it.
No, I don't want to see it either, but he made it meaningless. He did it, and then he scrapped it, and...
It was meaningless,
I just wish that he had that revelation before it was done. Like if John C. Reilly had gone to him and said, I'm going to leave if you do this, maybe he might have had a pause instead of, oh, it's happening, now I'm going to go.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know the order that things happened in, but if people could have somehow gotten across to him before it happened.
But maybe Lars did watch the scene in there, and in a moment that seems sometimes like he doesn't do it enough, he said to himself, that seems to be a bit much and maybe distracting to my story. And if that's the case, well, I get it. But either way, it seems like a waste.
It would have been the Lars von Trier movie where he kills a donkey. That's what it would have been.
Yeah.
And so it's smart that it wasn't there. I just wish it hadn't been done at all.
Maybe Riley's criticisms were more understood later. I don't know.
I wonder if he played the one man at the plantation who was not part of the family. You know, that extra man who was kind of a leader.
The Manderlay is pretty much left to her, right? Is that how?
Well, not at first. She tells her dad that she wants to stay there and help them.
And he leaves her half his men to help facilitate.
Yes, he leaves some men because she says to him at the end of the last movie, he had told her, if you come with me, I will share my power with you 50-50. You will be next to me in this endeavors, whatever they are. And then she said, okay, I want half my power. And he doesn't give her everyone. He doesn't give her completely half, but he gives her ultimately who she wants, because she wants a lawyer, because she wants the lawyer to draw up contracts that are beneficial to these people who have just been freed from being slaves. She also enslaves the white people to teach them a lesson. She says, you will continue being slaves until I think that you've learned your lessons.
She gets her dad's lawyer because at first the white people, they're offering like essentially indentured servitude contracts.
A lot of what actually happened.
And they're about to sign them, and she goes back and she gets the lawyer to look over, and then they get rid of him. She's like, no, this is what we're going to do. So even though her intentions are good, at least in her own heart, she has become the master.
She would never say that, which is why it's interesting at the end when they ask her to be the master, she rejects it entirely, not realizing how hypocritical that is. She takes it to an extreme, which we can get there, but the idea that she doesn't think that she's been pulling the strings this whole time is insane. Danny Glover is the oldest man on the property. He's been there the longest, and they have a rapport.
Wilhelm.
She tells him about the book. The book is called Mam's Law, and it describes the different slaves, their different stations, their personalities, and the amount of food they get, even depending on what category they fit in. It's very detailed, day to day, exactly what they have to do.
When they describe the personalities of the slaves, because it's written by a racist slaver, it's read like so-and-so inward, so-and-so inward. And John Hurt like reads that. And sometimes when she's quoting the book, she actually does a pretty good job at being so uncomfortable with it.
Yeah.
Where she says the word as written, but it sounds very uncomfortable. But towards the end, she just kind of says it, and it's a little bit more plain.
Because over time, she gets used to something that she thought she could never get used to.
So she identifies this guy named Timothy as the proud slave. Like number 1 is the proud slave, and the number 7 is the chameleon. And the chameleon is the person who does things that
they become what you want them to be to get what they want from you.
So there's this guy Timothy that has been marked as the proud slave, who's very much resistant and lecturing, and he makes like good points in terms of like, what are you taught? You think you're better than everyone, trying to almost like kind of the argument that her dad kind of gave her at the end of the movie, but in a different setting and a different circumstance.
Yeah, and he gives her, or he doesn't drink.
Yeah.
He doesn't gamble. He won't play cards with the men. He stands off separate.
Yeah.
But she's attracted to him almost immediately. And there's one lady who sees it and kids her about it throughout the whole thing. And
the white people that also work on this farm, it's really funny because she separates them for one. She segregates them from the black slaves, but she never assumes that they really need anything in servitude. It's just kind of like a revenge. While there are some people in that white group that are a little more educated than the slaves, of course, not everyone in that group is like smart or can even read. And there's one part where she's trying to get them to read something from the book as to what it means, and she hands it to this guy, and he can't fucking read it.
Read.
daily ration of food for slaves from Category 7. Oh no. 1 is...
Yeah.
So you realize there's this notion of like, if she actually lends the same amount of effort and education to them, if they can kind of come together through some kind of knowledge that she's trying to share, even though it's hubristic either way, then that seems like the smarter thing to do. But it seems like the white people and the black people, white slaves and the black slaves, they actually kind of come together on their own volition.
They do, yeah. They eventually start helping each other with things, and there's a few times that something needs to be built, and they'll build it together, that kind of thing.
But she also has to, like, organize them because they're so used to having their daily routines and lives dictated to them, and there's, like the bell doesn't ring anymore because no one's there to ring it.
So they don't know what time it is. She teaches them the power of the vote. She's trying to teach them about democracy. So she explains to them that if there's a disagreement in the town, the best thing to do is all come together and vote on what is going to happen. So they have a vote about whose rake belongs to this woman or that woman. They have a vote about different things like that matter, sort of, and then it starts getting crazy. They have a vote about what time it is.
Yeah.
And they vote of whether it's 5 till or 8 till, and they argue for so long that by the time they set the time, you know it's wrong. I said it. I was like, there's no way it's still 8 till, which we'll get her later.
And they also do this vote because there's a sick child who needs to eat, and that was a part of why they killed the donkey. And they make this vote that they're going to give less food to the older person since she's old and doesn't need it, which makes no sense. The first people you feed are the children and the elderly. It's the younger people that should be able to survive a little better without food.
I didn't realize she got less food. I thought they just I know they gave the potatoes to the child.
They gave her a little less because they saw her as old and she doesn't have to do as much, right? Mm-hmm. So they're giving food to this kid, and then everything seems all right because the kid seems to be clearing the plate.
But always at night.
But always at night, and no one ever sees the kid do it.
And she sleeps by this window.
But then, so everything's feeling optimistic, but then the kid dies. And then they realize that it's come to reveal that this old woman had been, when she'd go to the window, she'd see a plate of food sitting there that this kid was too sick to touch, and she would eat the food. So the whole time they think the kid's eating, and it's the old woman who was so hungry, so she had to come and get her own food. Grace understands. She knows she has to be punished in some way, but she understands why she did it. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
And that the reality is that the kid... Sorry. Hold on. My shit's like...
Yeah, bend the bendy part forward.
The reality is, like, if the kid was too sick to eat, then you're just kind of wasting food there anyway. Someone's going to have to eat it because there's not a lot because they planted their grain so late and they did all this so late.
Yeah, the argument that the dad makes, though, I also understand, which is they thought she was eating this food at night. So during the day, they weren't trying to feed her all day because they thought, oh, she ate all that protein last night. It's okay that she's not hungry right now because she's getting nutrients, but she wasn't getting nutrients. So on top of being sick, that baby starved to death.
Yeah.
She got pneumonia because Grace planted the idea for them to cut down all these trees to repair their homes, and cutting down the trees made the dust storm come in.
The trees used to block the dust storm in this area. She thought she was tearing down trees that were just a part of Mam's old little sitting spot.
Yeah, she thought it was like, oh, this woman's not here.
She just wanted that spot so she can go sit by herself. It actually served an environmental purpose.
And the white folks knew that, but no one told her or stopped her because she's not really asking anyone.
So they vote to kill old Wilma, played by Mona Hammond. And so Grace decides she's got to be the one to do it. And her and old Wilma were very close.
She slept in her bed. She stayed with her.
So old Wilma, she convinced her that, like, everything's fine. Everyone understands. I'll just sit with you in your cabin
until you
fall asleep. And when old Wilma falls asleep, Grace shoots her. So
it was the most humane way to do that if it had to be done, and they had voted for it to be done. So
meanwhile, the gangsters are getting restless because food that's sometimes scarce has to be divided amongst them too, and one guy straight leaves. But Timothy, it becomes a little more open to Grace over time. And
when she sends everybody away, immediately that night, he fucks her.
Yeah. And like
in Ma'am's bed.
She didn't do that with Paul Bettany, and he loved her.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and she has, and it's rough, but she's into it, and she has this long orgasm. But when she gets out of bed, and at this point, she's already seen the gangsters off because time is done, and it's like her last day.
And they reaped the harvest, and they got the money for the harvest, and she thought, oh, everything's going to be great.
And the gangsters were like guards, which really they were guarding them from the white people just in case. That was the original notion.
And to make sure that, everyone stayed pleasant.
So by the time she sleeps with Timothy, as played by Isaac de Bankolé, I don't know if I'm saying that right. He's pretty good in this movie.
He's great, yeah.
She gets fucked so hard that she doesn't hear that there has been conflict and buildings burning.
People are dead.
In Manderlay, and she comes out with some post-nut clarity, probably feeling good until she sees like dead people like lying around.
What happened?
I can't tell you. If you want a clear answer, you're going to ask somebody else.
The gangsters took the money.
What?
The gangsters took the money. That's the answer. And I reckon it's a pretty clear answer, too.
Certainly is very clear.
And there's this man who consistently throughout the movie cannot give you a straight answer, cannot tell you exactly what's happening. Somehow he is able to, in this moment, recount to her exactly how things got out of control and what happened. And they found that the money was gone. Timothy was supposed to be guarding the money. He wasn't there. The money got stolen. And so they all started blaming each other.
And he buried it and it got dug up. Everyone assumed that the gangsters just stole the money when they left.
And she believed that too.
But there was this grifter guy that had come into town earlier on in the movie. And he was very open about being a grifter to her. And he was trying to offer her a contract.
His thing was he would make a deal with her that when she paid people, he would make this deal with the slave owners, where when you pay them, he would then get them to play cards with him. He would cheat and win all their money back and then give her 80% and he would keep 20%. So really what it's doing is keeping these people enslaved, not letting them have their money and be free, still kind of enslaving them in a different way.
So the guy rolls back up. And this is after people have accused each other and have killed each other.
And she sent him away before. She was disgusted by him.
Yeah. So the guy rolls up at the end and he shows up and he hands her a wad of money. He's like, that's 80%. And she's like, what? And then he basically explains that Timothy, he'd been playing
and drinking.
Timothy said he wouldn't. And he won the money off of Timothy.
But he told everyone he was a Muncie.
Oh, of course. See, all the girls were wild about the tales that he told, all the Muncie tales, the proud African, the royal line, all that old-fashioned morality. And the accent, of course. It's on account of that the girls was easy to bed.
And it was pretty much all the money they made for the year. Like, they made enough money to be kind of independent, right? And they comes back and he's like, here's 80%. She explains that Timothy's the one that he won all the money off of. And he gives her the 80. And the 80 is enough to help the town. But now it's come revealed that Timothy just betrayed everyone. And other people died over it because everyone thought it was the gangsters and it wasn't.
And that's when she realizes that the one by his name in Ma'am's book was actually a 7. And he is actually a chameleon. She just because it's all very flowery writing. She just wanted to see it as a 1 because she felt something for him. One of the few times that the set really works in this one is when she is horny for him and she goes and stands outside of the bathhouse where all the men are naked and taking showers, and you can see these
one of the better parts.
Strong black male bodies like showering, and she's like quivering.
That's really the only scene where it serves in the exact same way as Dogville does. That's the only time it worked. Now, her father had sent word that she was going to come at a certain time to pick her up, and that if she's not there within like 30 minutes of 15 minutes of that time, then he will be gone and she'll never see him again.
And so she puts on her fancy coat and she goes in to meet them because they're all in the meeting room.
But there's also the matter of punishing Timothy, which he's all tied up like he's going to be whipped, and she's like, I'm not going to whip him. I'm not going to whip him. But she gets so mad about the scenario. How did she end up whipping him?
Well, so she comes in and tells them that she's going to leave. And before I leave, I want to tell you that Timothy's the one that stole the money. And they say, okay, well, we got to tell you because we just voted on 2 things. The first thing we voted on is we don't want anything to change at Manderlay. We want to keep ma'am's law, and we want you to be our ma'am. Those are the 2 things they voted on. Is they decided she needs to be in charge. And when she said she wouldn't do it, they threatened her. They basically said, we are going to enslave you to be our ma'am.
Yeah. Well, and Danny Glover, like, starts quoting the pages of Ma'am's Law.
I thought no slave had ever seen this book. How do you know what's on page 104 of Ma'am's Law?
Because I wrote it.
He's the one that wrote the book.
And some of the folks knew that he had written the book. He goes, oh yeah, I told this number and this number, but not that number.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't be trusted or whatever.
It's all in my meticulous hand.
They string up Timothy and they give her the whip. And at first...
Well, they didn't hang him. They tie him to a thing.
Oh, yeah, sorry. They tied him up. And you're right. She gets so mad.
She gets so fucking pissed at the scenario, the frustration that she does whip Timothy. And, well, she goes out to meet her father and finds a note on the ground. And the note, this is kind of ridiculous.
It is.
The note is like, well, we came up and we were waiting for you, and we decided to peek into Manderlay to see how things were going.
I popped over to the fence behind the bushes and peeked inside to check that you were okay. To my great surprise, it really did look as if you had a good grip on things for once. I'm proud of you, my girl. I hope we meet up someday, so you can tell me what you actually meant by no times at Manderlay. Love, your dumb old dad.
And we saw you whipping one of your slaves, and we just want to say that you've got everything under control. We're so
Great
proud
job.
of you. Good job. So we just left because the time that they debated and voted to set is, of course, not the right time, not the time that her father had. So who knows how long they even sat there. They could. I think that he said that he gave her a little bit more time.
He said after 15 minutes, I think he waited 15 more, and then he sent somebody to look. And when he looked, he went to look too, and he saw her, and he was like, "Oh hell, she's got it under control. She's the ma'am now." And I don't know why that would be under control. You would think you would look at that and go, "That's not my daughter. I need to talk to her."
So now we have slaves enslaving a woman to enslave them, which is insane. Of course, half of them are dead at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And so she makes her escape and has to run. She's completely on her own. And at the end, we see her making her way across the country out of, like, Dogville was like in Colorado. Manderlay is somewhere in Texas. And it looks like, yeah, as we said.
She's going northeast. They are about to literally chase her with flaming torches. And her dad tells her that at the beginning. He's like, you can try to help them, but they're not going to go. And he actually says, they're going to chase you out with torches. And they do.
Another ridiculous scene that is, like, goofy, but also the movie itself acknowledges this decision that Grace instantly regrets, is that when the white people, I forget why she punishes them, but she punishes them by making them serve the black slaves with blackface on their face. But the funniest part is not that in and of itself, but that, like, the narrator basically speaks as though, like...
That evening, Grace thought that her idea of making the whites make up their faces, which had seemed so just and edifying in her flash of anger that afternoon, was perhaps a tad too much in the wrong direction.
She realized that witnessing this, maybe this wasn't, like, a very good idea.
And this is like all these men, and Chloe Sevigny, that's the woman
right,
who's left wearing blackface.
Insane. Dogville, I felt like it was a lot better crafted,
Yeah.
and this movie is just like a little bonkers, right? Yeah, as far as what he's trying to say and the flaws within, you know, it's like that classic, the road to hell is paved in good intentions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just...
I don't know what he could have done different. I think you're right. If he had just gone completely different style and tried to tell this story, it would have been better.
But now that if he does get to the third one, I guess now we can expect the minimal sets again. Now he's got to do it again because he did it 2 out of 3 times. It would be weird if he did it twice and then didn't do it at all the third time. If he makes the movie.
Or it would be him.
Or he'll drink himself to death and never
He's
make
crazy.
the movie.
He's not one of our dogs.
He is crazy, yes.
He's not a dog.
He's kind of fun sometimes, but he's not our dog. Didn't we say that Rainer Werner Fassbender was one of our dogs?
I think so.
Look,
I have the list.
Look, he's crazy too. If he was around and we were like, "Hey, you're our dog," he'd be like, we would be his like subs. Like by the end of the day, that guy would probably like throw liquor bottles at us.
Oh, I don't want that.
Yeah, Rainer Werner Fassbender was a sadist. I mean,
I'm not completely turned off.
A gay sadist.
Still okay. Okay, here's our dogs: John Carpenter, George Romero, Harry Dean Stanton, Peter Cushing, and Peter Falk, and I have removed Rainer Werner Fassbender.
Yeah, he can't. Look, it's not that we don't admire him or our fans, but it takes it's a specific thing to be our dog. Do you think characters can be our dog, like movie characters?
I don't love that, but sure.
We'll debate it. Also, I got copyright struck on Dogville so many times. If you follow on YouTube and kept getting notifications that Dogville has been posted, that's why. And I kind of gave up after like the 10th time. So it's
understandable.
It's a block. Like 20% of our viewing audience cannot watch Dogville. I think you can watch it in the U.S., but not Canada or England or Germany. But it is on podcast. So there's a couple now that for everyone is podcast only. The Dogville and the Boy and the Heron are pod only. In most areas. Mm-hmm. But we're going to give this a 1 through 5 each. I do think Manderlay is weird enough and interesting enough to merit a 3.25.
I am giving it a 3.
Alrighty. So check it out at a 6.25. Manderlay is between the film It Lives Again, the It's Alive sequel, and David Cronenberg's early film Rabid. It's at least as good as those movies, if not better. And it's still pretty good. Mm-hmm. But if you compare, we're really comparing Lars to himself more than anything. And so yeah, that's really how it pans out here. But we have one more Lars von Trier movie to discuss, and it will drop next week. We'll finish off a dreary year of Lars von Trier early on, and we will watch his serial killer movie, The House That Jack Built. I think that's the last movie he made too. So it's appropriate. So Matt Dillon as a serial killer in The House That Jack Built. We'll see how that pans out. And then as far as all of his feature films up to date, we have seen all of Lars von Trier's movie. It's been some real ups and downs.
Yeah.
Some real like wincing here and there. But 2 movies that we think are actually quite amazing. And I think most of his movies are at least like good. I don't think anyone is... I think he's no lower than a B. And Dancer in the Dark probably would have got a C, but you're the one who
I loved it.
that.
Agree that all of them are at least good. They're all interesting to talk and think about.
Sure.
They're all interesting ideas.
So subscribe, check the show notes for links, other places to find us. If you like the show, leave a nice review wherever you do so, places like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and such. And you can leave a comment on YouTube. Tell us what you think about Manderlay. I may not go as clip heavy on this. I probably should have said that at the beginning because I had copyright strike issues, but I'll try to put something in. Oh, I do want to say where we've been complimenting Lars's budget handling, whereas movies seem to be lower budget than a lot of your typical American movies easily, but that he manages to make over budget. This is the one exception to the rule. This cost $14 million and it made during its opening box office $675,000.
Whoa.
Lars actually managed to exceed a smarter budget, but this is one of the few movies where that doesn't work out for him. Most of the time he does exceed his budget in box office, which is kind of amazing, often on his name alone, because he is an intriguing guy that's going to make you think about things and shit, good or bad. But yes, The House That Jack Built will be next Monday, and that was Manderlay and
Death to All Traitors.
These are for you, because we believe in you. Now run along and paint your fantastic pictures. And never mind those closed-minded folks who think they know what art is meant to look like. Give them hell from me, Jim.
Excuse me. But I ain't Jim. I'm Jack. That's Jim.